That sound is the pulse of Hamilton, Ohio. The whistle you're hearing isn't just a sound, it's a reminder of what built this place. 1,800 times a day, the horn cuts through this valley, a constant echo of the industry that shaped this city and the trains that never stopped coming. For more than a century, Hamilton moved to the rhythm of steel wheels and locomotive horns. The rails didn't just pass through the city, they powered it. Cities don't rise by accident. Before the machines, this was a river town, with neighborhoods carved out by immigrants and industry. Downtown grew around the rail lines, a city center powered by the noise of work. But while the tracks are still busy, the buildings beside them have fallen silent. Hamilton was once the greatest manufacturing city of its size. Today is a landscape of concrete ghosts and industrial skeletons. Those tracks fed giants. Champion Paper, once one of the largest paper operations in the country. Mosler Safe, vaults trusted by banks and governments around the world. Baldwin, Lima, Hamilton engines built strong enough to pull America forward. Hamilton just didn't manufacture goods, it built the American middle class. When the mills closed, the impact was felt block by block. Factories went dark, jobs disappeared, neighborhoods changed, but today, the city is fighting back. A slow recovery defined by contrast. New investment rising beside streets still struggling with high poverty and low property values. Here the divide is visible in every direction, the parts holding on and the parts left behind. We're diving deep into the history, the architecture, and the data of a town refusing to be forgotten. This is Hamilton, a city built on industry, shaped by decline, and still searching for what comes next. I'm Alan, this is Going There, Doing That. Today we follow these tracks into the heart of Hamilton, Ohio. And here's a couple of maps to show you where Hamilton, Ohio is located. It is just northwest of Cincinnati, Ohio. As the last car rolls past and the whistle fades, the tracks lead us straight into the heart of Hamilton. Just ahead is the depot, the place where the city's story truly began. This station once connected Hamilton to the rest of the Midwest. Workers arrived here, raw materials arrived here, entire industries depended on what came in and what went out of this building. Long before the factories reached their peak, this depot was the gateway. Every mill, every machine shop, and every neighborhood grew up outward from these rails. And even though the trains don't stop here anymore, the depot still stands. A reminder of the era when Hamilton was rising, expanding, and powering the region. The depot sitting here today is more than just an old building. It's the original front door to Hamilton. Built in the mid-19th century, this wasn't just a place to catch a ride. It was a nerve center of Cincinnati, Hamilton, and Dayton Railroad. The gateway that connected this city to the Cincinnati, Dayton, Chicago, and entire Midwest rail network. Every major line that mattered passed through here. The smaller wing dates back to 1850s, to standing through the Civil War and the birth of the Industrial Revolution. In those days, the depot was the heartbeat of the city. Passenger trains stopped here dozens of times a day. Immigrants arrived with everything they owned. Salesmen stepped off these platforms. Families said goodbye to sons heading off to war. If you were a tycoon, a soldier, or an immigrant looking for work, your first breath of Hamilton air was taken right here. As Hamilton exploded into a manufacturing giant, the depot grew with it. The grand two-story addition was built in the 1890s to handle the flood of people and wealth pouring into the city. It even survived the Great Flood of 1913, standing as a beacon of stability while the river tried to reclaim the town. It wasn't just a train station, it was a lifeline. The mills got their coal here, the machine shops got their steel here, finished goods left these tracks and traveled across the country. But as the passenger rail declined and the factories closed, the depot fell quiet. The trains kept coming, but they stopped stopping. By the late 20th century, the Grand Gateway had become a ghost. In 2021, it was nearly demolished to make way for track expansion, a piece of history almost erased by the very industry that created it. Saved by the city and moved blocks away from its original home, the depot now stands as a monument. It no longer welcomes trains, but it remains one of the last reminders of Hamilton's rail-powered beginning, a symbol of the era that built this city and the area it's still trying to recover from. If the passenger depot was Hamilton's front door, our next stop was its loading dock. Just a few blocks away at 1000 Maple Avenue sits the muscle of the rail yard. This massive structure was built in the late 1800s by the Cincinnati-Hamilton-Dayton Railroad, or the CH&D. It was designed as a specialized freight house, the central nervous system for every crate, coil, and carton entering the city. Completed during the peak of Hamilton's industrial explosion, it was the lungs of the city. This is where the raw materials for the big three arrived. Every pound of coal for the paper mills, every ton of steel for the safe companies passed through these doors. For over a century, this was a place of constant motion. Even today, the interior walls still hold the signatures of freight workers from as far back as 1909, men who lived and worked in the shadow of the steam engines. But unlike many of the ghosts we see along these tracks, 1000 Maple is a survival story. After decades of decline following the CH&D's exit, it was recently restored for over $1 million. It stands as proof that Hamilton's industry bones aren't just history, they're the foundation for its future. What's really cool about this, if you would look real closely, you can see the loading bays where horse-drawn wagons would have pulled up to load and unload their goods. If you're into stories like this, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the next one.
At the next stop sign, turn right.
As I was leaving the freight depot and heading toward the next destination, I come across this little gem here. This building looks like it was probably built in the early 1900s. You can see it used to be a store. You can see the storefront and where the windows used to be. This was probably a corner store or neighborhood market, maybe a butcher shop or some sort of repair shop. Take a look at this spot. It's 1005 South 9th Street. It's been here for decades, right in the heart of Hamilton's old industrial belt. Today it's home to Trans ACC, a metal coating operation, but the building itself goes back much farther. In mid-century brickwork, tall bay doors, the kind of place built for machining, fabrication, back when this neighborhood lived for the railroad and the foundry. So here's my question for the locals and the history buffs. Do you know what this building used to be? What name was on the corner before Trans ACC moved in? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's see who knows the hidden history of the Second Ward. If Hamilton was the city of sculpture, its true backbone was forged in fire and hardened steel, and no name carried more weight globally than Mosler safe. Right here on Grand Boulevard stood one of Hamilton's most legendary industries, the place where this city built the unbreakable. Founded in 1867 and moved to Hamilton in 1891, Mosler became the largest safe manufacturer on the planet. They didn't just build boxes, they built fortresses. At its peak, this complex covered entire city blocks, fueled by rail lines that brought in tons of heavy steel plate every single day. The world trusted Mosler with its most precious cargo. Their vaults protect the original U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but their ultimate test came in 1945 when the atomic bomb leveled Hiroshima. In Mosler Vault, one of the only structures left standing in the ruins, the building was vaporized, but the Hamilton steel held firm. Mosler didn't just make bank safes, they built the blast-proof doors and vaults used in embassies, missile bases, and some of the most sensitive government sites in the country. For generations, this factory was a cornerstone of Hamilton's economy, a place where craftsmanship and national security crossed paths. But even the strongest vaults couldn't withstand the shifting tides of the global economy. When Mosler finally closed its doors in 2001, it left a massive void in the heart of this neighborhood. Today, new Civic buildings rise where the foundry fires once burned. Mosler wasn't just a factory, it was a symbol of Hamilton's strength, a reminder that for more than a century, the things built on this ground were truly made to last forever. So I want to hear from the people who remember this place. Did you work here? Did someone in your family? What stories got passed down about Mosler in the area when this factory helped define Hamilton's identity? Drop your memories in the comments. Mosler wasn't just a company, it was part of who Hamilton used to be. If Mosler's safe was the muscle of Hamilton, Champion paper was the heartbeat. On the banks of the Great Miami River, where the air once smelled like steam, pulp, and hot machinery, stood a giant. For more than a century, this massive complex dominated the riverfront, turning Hamilton into a global capital of the written word. Founded by Peter Thomas in 1893, Champion didn't just make paper, they revolutionized it. They pioneered the process of coating paper on both sides, creating the glossy stock that powered magazines like National Geographic and Time. But Champion's influence reached far beyond publishing. During both World Wars, this mill produced coated paper for use for military maps, naval charts, bombing overlays, and field manuals. In the Cold War, Champion's precision-coated stock was used for intelligence documents and satellite imagery. The world's most powerful militaries trusted Hamilton paper. This place was once a world unto itself, a city inside a city. Thousands of Championites worked these floors. Entire families, generation after generation, all moving in rhythm with the thunder of paper machines the length of football fields. Champion had its own power plant, its own fire department, and even its own legendary cafeteria. For Hamilton families, a job at the paper mill meant stability, pride, and middle-class life. This mill has survived everything. In the Great Flood of 1913, the river reclaimed the valley, burying these machines under feet of water and mud. But while other cities gave up, Champion rebuilt. It became a symbol of Hamilton's refusal to stay down. The river powered everything. It fed the boilers, cooled the machinery, and carried away the waste. Hamilton's identity was tied to this water, and Champion was the reason the city became one of the most important paper-making hubs in America. But no giant stands forever. Global competition, automation, and shifting markets began to erode the foundation. By the late 20th century, the mill that once symbolized unstoppable growth became a reminder of the pressures facing American manufacturing. When the machines finally went quiet in 2012, it left behind more than empty buildings. It left memories of shift whistles echoing across the river, of fathers and mothers coming home covered in pulp dust, and of a city that once ran on steam and sweat. Today, this site is transforming from a place that made paper to a place that makes memories. The smokestacks no longer drift with white steam, but the legacy of Champion is etched into the very skyline of Hamilton, a monument to an era when this river ran with the ink of the world, and when the mill supplied not just magazines and textbooks, but the maps and manuals that helped guide American soldiers across the globe. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Hamilton's history, feel free to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It helps me keep making these long-form projects, and if you've got memories of Champion or Mosler, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Long before Hamilton was a city of factories, paper mills, and machine shops, it was a city of power, and not just political power, literal power. This unassuming brick structure on the riverbank is one of the oldest municipal power plants in the United States, and one of the reasons Hamilton became an industrial force. In the mid-1800s, Hamilton built something visionary, a hydraulic system that diverted the river's strength into a network of canals, turbines, and mills. That system, and later this power plant, didn't just light homes, it powered foundries, paper machines, machine shops, and factories that built Hamilton's identity. This plant was more than a building, it was a promise that Hamilton would control its own destiny. While other cities depended on private utilities, Hamilton owned its own power. This meant cheaper electricity, stronger industry, and the ability to attract giants like Mosler Safe, Beckett Paper, and Champion Paper. Inside these walls, turbines once roared day and night. Water from the Great Miami spun massive wheels that fed electricity into a growing city for decades. This plant kept Hamilton's factories alive, powering the machines that shaped steel, pressed paper, and built the products that traveled the world. This wasn't just any power plant. In 1918, Henry Ford himself took notice. He purchased Hamilton's small hydroelectric facility to power his tractor operations. Proof that the energy coming out of this river was valuable enough to catch the eye of America's most famous industrialist. But time changes everything. As technology evolved and new power sources emerged, the old hydro plant faded into the background. The turbines slowed, the generators cooled, and the building that once electrified an entire city became a monument to a different area. Today, the Hamilton Power Plant stands as a reminder of the city's ingenuity, a place where water became electricity, electricity became opportunity. It's a symbol of the moment Hamilton stopped waiting for someone else to power its future and decided to generate its own. On a quiet stretch of Heaton Street sits a building that never made headlines, but helped keep Hamilton Industries' heart beating. This is 400 Heaton Street, home of Cornillac Corporation. Cornillac opened in 1946, right after World War II, when Hamilton was shifting from heavy industry to precision engineering. They didn't build the biggest machines, they built the ones that made everything else move. Conveyor systems, material handling equipment, specialized wheels. Cornillac earned more than 100 patents, supplying factories across the country and even the U.S. military with rugged logistics gear. This corridor became a hub for mid-century engineering firms. While the giants like Champion and Mosler defined Hamilton's skyline, companies like Cornillac kept the city's industrial engine running. And unlike so many factories that came and went, Cornillac stayed. Decades of change, recession, global competition, and this place kept building. Today, 400 Heaton Street stands as one of Hamilton's quiet survivors, a steady post-war innovator still rooted in the city where it began. For more than 160 years, this block was one of Hamilton's industrial anchors. Founded in 1848, the Beckett Paper Company wasn't the oldest mill in America, but it was the oldest paper mill west of the Alleghenies, long before the city became known for steel and safe making. Beckett was already here, shaping Hamilton's identity as a paper-making town. Beckett specialized in fine papers, the heavy cover stock used for menus, brochures, and business reports. This was a civilian operation from start to finish, built on craftsmanship and generations of local workers. In 2005, Mohawk Fine Papers took over the operations and kept the lines running for a few more years. But this wasn't a case of production moving overseas. The world simply changed. Businesses stopped printing reports, menus went digital, brochures became PDFs. Marketing shifted online and the demand for fine paper collapsed. In 2012, after more than a century and a half of continuous production, the mill fell silent. Fires and demolition eventually erased most of what remained. Today, the Beckett mill is gone, but its story still echoes. It was Hamilton's oldest industry, the oldest paper mill west of the Alleghenies, and a reminder of how quickly an industry that built a city can disappear. Hamilton wasn't built by just one factory or one industry. The city grew on a network of mills, machine shops, and foundries that worked together to power the Midwest. Even beyond the giants everyone knows, there were other plants that kept the city's industrial engine running. Hooven, Owens, and Rensler was one of them. HOR built the massive steam and diesel engines that powered the factories across the country. Their machines drove paper mills, steel mills, and early power plants. If you turned on a light or heard a factory whistle in the early 20th century, chances are an HOR engine was behind them. Not far away, General Electric's Hamilton Works produced motors and generators that ended up in plants around the world. For decades, GE was a steady employer, a place where electricians, machinists, and engineers built the equipment that kept American industry running. And Ford had a presence here too. Not a full assembly plant, but a parts facility that fed components into Ford's larger factories across the Midwest. It was one more link between Hamilton's workforce and the nation's manufacturing backbone. These weren't headline factories, but they were the backbone of Hamilton's industrial ecosystem. They kept the machines running, kept the supply chains moving, and kept thousands of families working. Together, these companies shaped Hamilton just as much as the giants did. They built the neighborhoods, filled the schools, and gave the city its rhythm. Some are gone, some remain, but all of them left their mark on the landscape and on the people who call this place home. If you grew up around these factories or have memories of this era, I'd love to hear them. And if you want to follow along as we explore more of the Midwest history, subscribing and tapping the bell helps keep this project moving. The like also helps more people find these stories. As I was filming this, another freight train rode through, a reminder that Hamilton's rail lines are still some of the busiest in the Midwest. The industries have changed, but the trains keep coming. Long before Hamilton became a city of paper mills and engine works, it was the machine tools of Niles that set the pace. Niles Tool Works began in Cincinnati in 1840s, and by the early 1870s they needed more room, and Hamilton wanted the industry. The city offered free land, free brick, and water power from the hydraulic canal. And in 1872, the Niles plant rose along the North 3rd Street. Inside these long brick buildings, workers built the machines that built America: massive lathes, boring mills, and steam engines shipped to railroads, shipyards, and factories across the country. By the 1890s, Niles was considered one of the largest machine tool works in the world. Every mile of track laid, every locomotive repaired, carried a piece of Hamilton's craftsmanship. And when the country went to war, Hamilton's machines went with it. Niles didn't build weapons, but their tools powered the factories that did, machining naval gun parts, ship components, and locomotive equipment for troop transport. After Niles merged with Hooven, Owens, and Rensler in 1928 to form General Machinery Corporation, the military connection became even stronger. In World War II, this combined plant produced engines for Liberty ships and precision components for the arsenal of democracy. Hamilton's industrial skill wasn't just local anymore, it was global. The name changed over the years: Niles Tool Works, Niles Bennett Pond, General Machinery, but the work stayed the same: precision, power, and the kind of heavy industry that defined the city for generations. Today the old mill works lettering still clings to the brick. The machines are gone, the shops are quiet, but the building remains a reminder of an era when Hamilton's steel and skill helped build, move, and define the modern world. For 100 years, the rhythm of this city was set by the whistle. When it blew, the machine stopped, but the city didn't. Instead, thousands of workers flooded across the river. They left the heat of the foundry floor for the lights of High Street. This wasn't just where they bought their groceries, it was where they spent their wages, celebrated their weekends, and built a life worthy of a hard day's work they did. This leads us to our next pillar, civic and commercial history. If the factories were the city's muscle, downtown was its heart. From the Little Chicago era of the 1920s to the revitalization we see today, this pavement has a story to tell. Entering High Street from the east, you pass under the railroad lines. This is the true gateway to downtown. For a century, this underpass separated the factories of the east side from the banks of the west. As we come through, the noise from the highway fades and the city changes scale. The first giant to greet you is the Anthony Wayne Hotel. Built in the 1920s, this was Pillar 4 in action, a place where business deals were made over cigars and whiskey. It stands as a sentinel marking the beginning of the Canyon of Commerce. Back on street level, look at the density here. In many Rust Belt cities, these blocks were demolished for parking lots. But Hamilton kept its walls. These rows of storefronts create an outdoor hallway that leads us straight into the past. But the real anchor of this district is the Butler County Courthouse, completed in 1889. This is a masterclass in Second Empire architecture. Look at the massive central dome and the intricate stone carvings. For over 130 years, while the factories churned out products, this building churned out policy. It was the power center that kept the city grounded. At the Great Miami River, the Soldiers, Sailors, and Pioneers Monument stands guard over the bridge, marking the spot where Fort Hamilton was founded. We've driven from the industrial rails back to the pioneer roots, covering over 200 years of history in just a few city blocks. Leaving the courthouse, the road opens up. We are crossing the Great Miami River. This is Pillar 2, water-based history. For centuries, this river was the highway that brought commerce to the valley, but it was also a divider. As the wheels hit the west side, the street name changes from High Street to Main Street, and the vibe changes with it. We are now entering what used to be the independent city of Rossville. Notice how the architecture shifts here. On the east side, it was about grand civic monuments. Here on Main Street, it's about the neighborhood. These buildings are tighter, packed shoulder to shoulder. This was the Frontier Commercial District, a place where the local shop ate and lived. Merging in 1854, Rossville gave up its name, but it never gave up its identity. It still feels like a district village within the city. A perfect example of Pillar 4 local history surviving into the modern day. Leaving the government center and the commercial canyon behind, we've crossed the Great Miami River. For decades, this water was a dividing line between the industrial east and the residential west. As High Street becomes Main Street, the scale changes immediately. We are trading the city for the village. This is old Rossville. It wasn't just a place to shop, it was a place to live. And that brings us to the most important question for any city trying to make a comeback. What is it actually like to live here? You can have all the factories and all the courthouses in the world, but if the neighborhoods don't work, the city doesn't work. So let's look at the roof lines, from the mansions of the mill owners to the cottages of the workers. Hamilton's housing stock is a time capsule, and right now it's one of the most interesting real estate markets in Ohio. Old Rossville isn't flashy, it's lived in. It's a neighborhood that shows how Hamilton actually worked, how the families built their lives, and how close-knit city can feel when everything you need is just a short walk away. These streets were laid out long before cars, and you can still feel that in the way the houses sit right up to the sidewalk. Porches become front row seats to the neighborhood, and the distance between neighbors is measured in feet, not fences. But look closely, Rossville isn't just workers' cottages and brick duplexes. Tucked between the modest homes are some surprisingly large, almost mansion-like houses. These belong to the shop owners, the foremen, and the early business leaders who wanted to live close to the mills, but still show a little status. You'll see wide porches, tall roof lines, and the kind of craftsmanship that only comes from the 19th century. It's a reminder that this neighborhood wasn't just working class, it was a full ecosystem of Hamilton's early life. Some homes are restored, some are worn, some are waiting for their next chapter. But that mix is what makes Rossville feel real. It's not a curated historic district, it's a living one. Kids still ride bikes here, people still sit on their porches in the summer, and if you walk these blocks at the right time of day, you can almost imagine the factory whistle echoing across the river, calling people home for supper. This is the kind of neighborhood that gives Hamilton its walkability score, a place where the past isn't preserved behind glass, but lived in every single day. If you've lived in Rossville or have memories of these streets, feel free to share them in the comments. These neighborhoods mean something to a lot of people, and your stories help keep that history alive. Moving just north of the central business district, the architecture shifts gears. The storefronts fall away, the streets tighten, and we enter German Village, one of Hamilton's oldest, most carefully preserved neighborhoods. For decades, Hamilton wasn't just an industrial town, it was a magnet for immigrants. And in the mid-19th century, thousands of Germans arrived here to work the paper mills and machine shops. These brick streets and tight-knit blocks were built by stonemasons, carpenters, and craftsmen who shaped the city's early identity. Every house here tells a story, the arched windows, the hand-cut stone, foundations, the steep roof lines that have stood through floods, booms, and busts. Now pay attention to the details. These weren't the mansions of the factory owners. We'll see those later on Dayton Lane. These were the homes of the machinists, the molders, the tool makers. But look at the craftsmanship. These men were skilled tradesmen and they didn't cut corners on their own homes. Even the modest cottages have a level of detail you don't see in modern construction. This is Pillar 5 in action. Italianate brackets, ornate cornices, wave glass, and solid brick construction that has stood for more than 150 years. In many cities, workers' housing meant shacks that rotted away. In Hamilton, it meant brick fortresses, built by hand, built to last, and still standing today. And today, that preservation is a neighborhood superpower. You can't build this kind of character from scratch anymore. The homes sit close to the street, the sidewalks are narrow, and the porches feel like open invitations. This is a neighborhood designed for walking, for neighbors knowing neighbors, for a community that lived its life out in the open. Some houses are restored to postcard perfection, others show their age, but together they form one of the most character-rich districts in the entire city. And for our quality of life index, this is our first data point. Walkable, historic, and deeply rooted in the people who built Hamilton from the ground up. William Wilkes Carriage House. Leaving German Village, the houses begin to stretch upward, the roof lines get taller, the porches get wider, and suddenly the neighborhoods shift from the homes of the craftsmen to the homes of the people who own the factories they worked in. This is Dayton Lane Historical District, one of the most architecturally impressive residential corridors in the entire state of Ohio. These aren't just big houses, they are statements built between the 1880s and 1920s. They were designed by the same architects who shaped Cincinnati's wealthy enclaves. You'll see Queen Anne towers, Romanesque arches, wraparound porches, stained glass, slate roofs, and the full vocabulary of Gilded Age ambition. Every block feels like a catalog of architectural styles competing for attention. But what makes Dayton Lane fascinating isn't just the size of the homes, it's the context. These mansions weren't tucked away in gated suburbs. They were built right next to the factories, right next to the workers' neighborhoods. The industrialists lived close enough to hear the same whistle, walk the same streets, and see the same river their employees crossed every day. That proximity is rare in American cities, and it gives Hamilton a unique social and architectural. As you drive through the surrounding streets, you'll see the layers of that history. Some homes are fully restored, glowing with fresh paint and polished woodwork. Others show their age. Peeling trim, sagging porches, windows that have seen a century of winters. But even the worn ones carry a kind of dignity. They're reminders of a time when Hamilton was booming, when the factories were roaring, and when the people who built this city invested in homes. For our quality of life index, this district hits the character category hard. You simply can't build neighborhoods like this anymore. The craftsmanship, the materials, the scale, it's all irreplaceable. Dayton Lane isn't just a historical district, it's a living museum to Hamilton's industrial peak, and a glimpse of what the city could become again if these homes continue to be restored and lived in. Leaving the mansions of Dayton Lane behind, the streets settle into something more familiar. The homes get smaller, the roof line simpler, and suddenly we're in the older middle-class neighborhoods, the places where most Hamilton families lived their everyday lives. These aren't showpieces, they're the backbone of the city. You'll see American foursquares, 1920s bungalows, and post-war cottages. Solid, practical homes built for teachers, clerks, machinists, and young families starting out. Many of these homes have been cared for across generations, tidy lawns, porch furniture, flags on the railings, the kind of details that tell you people take pride in where they live. And like most Rust Belt cities, you'll find a mix. Some homes are beautifully maintained, some need a little work, and a few are waiting for their next chapter. But that mix is part of the story. It shows a neighborhood that's lived in, not staged. A place where the rhythms of daily life still matter more than architectural drama. For our quality of life index, this is where affordability comes into focus. Hamilton's middle-class neighborhoods offer something rare in America right now. Stability at a price people can actually afford. These are the kinds of streets where you can buy a real house with a yard and a porch for less than the cost of a small apartment in a major city. That affordability isn't just statistics, it's a lifeline for families trying to build a future. So while these homes may not have the towers or stained glass of Dayton Lane, they represent something just as important, the everyday foundation of the Hamilton's community. This is the meeting experience, the place where the city's past and present meet in the most practical way. Now for the safety statistics for Hamilton. Everything is per 1,000 residents. I'm going to read Hamilton's score and the U.S. average, but it is per 1,000 residents. So their total crime is 14.90 crimes per 1,000. U.S. average is 25.8. Their property crime is 12.93 per 1,000 residents. United States average is 22 per 1,000. And violent crime is 1.97. And United States average is 3.8. per 1,000. Affordability, the cost of living is 12.5% below the U.S. average. Median home price is $108,000. The U.S. average is $295,000. Median rent is $829. U.S. median rent is $1,100. Hamilton is far more affordable than the U.S. average in every category. Hamilton City Schools are rated as an average performing district overall because the rating includes things like graduation rates, attendance, and student growth. But when you look at the test scores, math, reading, science proficiency, Hamilton falls below the national average. So the overall rating is average, but the academic proficiency numbers are a little bit lower. Here's my quality of life score for Hamilton, Ohio. The final score is 67.3. The rating is fair but improving. And as always, here's my sources I use to get my statistics from for this part of the video. Alright, that's going to wrap up my look at Hamilton. And if you've watched some of my other videos, you'll probably notice something a little different in this one. When I went through the residential neighborhoods, you didn't see any boarded up homes. That's not because I skipped them or chose not to show them. It's because I genuinely didn't come across any while I was filming. Every city has its challenges, and Hamilton is no exception, but the neighborhoods I drove through were lived in, maintained, and very much alive. So take that for what it's worth. Thanks for riding along with me today, and if you want to see more towns across Ohio and the region, stick around. I've got plenty more coming.